I need to like find a way to just turn everything off when I record. Do you have that problem?
Oh, yeah.
It's
No,
so
that's
bad.
the hardest part.
Okay.
It's like the sound, and luckily because we're using audio, like, it doesn't, our mics don't pick up a lot of outside noise.
Yeah.
It's definitely like, we just did one where we were in, like, the lobby of a hotel, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
So, like, I was like,
Frustrating.
when you're listening into headphones, it's so...
Yeah.
You hear more than actually even gets recorded, I
I
feel like.
know.
But it's so obnoxious.
It ekes me
You can hear
out.
outside noise.
It ekes me out.
Yeah.
Okay, well, here we go. What is up, folks? My name's Justin Khanna, and you are listening to the Emulsion podcast, specifically episode 27. And I'm psyched today because I'm not alone today. We have a guest on, and I'm going to introduce her in a moment. But first, today's beverage. This is a little bit of a throwback. I think I've actually had this combo before here on the show. It's a single origin Ethiopian coffee that I just made with a little AeroPress action out of this little striped mug here that has a J on it. But it's worth drinking today because my girlfriend and I, this is our favorite coffee actually, and they've been out of it for like weeks at our favorite coffee shop, but we picked some up like 2 days ago, I think, and we've been swooning over it ever since it's come back into our lives, so this is definitely amping me up for today's interview, which is with a lovely lady who actually is a past colleague of mine. We worked very briefly together at Per Se when I was an extern there, and she spent a lot of time in the restaurant industry and worked at some pretty incredible places, but has since left that and voyaged into the podcasting domain by starting Effin B Radio, which is a Charleston-based podcast taking a ridiculous look at the food and beverage community, tackling issues that don't matter at all. And I'm taking this from your website. It is my sincere pleasure to introduce to the show Lindsay Collins. What's up, Lindsay?
Hi, Justin. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm stoked to have you. It's always great having other podcast folks on the podcast.
Yeah,
there's
I
no
always
nerves.
say it's like a podcast within a podcast.
Yeah,
like, kind of
Inception.
Find your little place where you're like, is this your show? Is this my show?
Absolutely.
Is this my show?
Absolutely.
It's fun.
So I'd be interested to start maybe by kind of letting you kind of riff a little bit on just introducing yourself, kind of giving a little bit of background on how you got your start in food and beverage, and
Totally.
kind of how the hospitality industry found its way into your life, because I know that's not always the same for everyone.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, it's definitely by accident, and then kind of took precedence just from sheer my interests kind of shifted. But I was in music school. I'm from South Carolina.
Yep.
And I was in music school at the College of Charleston, and then applied to Berklee School of Music in Boston, and I got in. And so I was like, okay, I'll go up there. And I kind of worked in restaurants. I started actually, you're talking about coffee, I started in a Starbucks when I was 17.
Whoa.
My first kind of entry to, I guess that's technically a restaurant.
Absolutely. Was that out of necessity? Like you just needed the cash, or it was...
Yeah, I was in college, and I was like, I think I'll just try to get a job doing something that could be part-time, and it seemed like an easy thing, and I was really into coffee. I still am. So that was something that I just started doing. Mm-hmm. And I got my first job in a restaurant in Charleston. It's closed now, but it was really, really funny, that whole, like, just kind of faking it till you make it.
Yep. So
I can remember, like, opening a bottle of wine and not knowing how to do it, but being too afraid to, like, admit. So I just, like yanked on the cork for about 25 minutes, table side, until someone came over and was like, what are you doing?
Oh,
What's
geez.
happening?
So was it, like, a nice enough restaurant like that? Or was it kind of like a, kind of hole in the wall? Or was it like a bistro? What was that restaurant like for you?
It was called Dress and Chops, and at that time, it was like the era of the steakhouse. Like, we're talking 2004.
Okay.
So it was definitely high-end. Like, the food was really expensive, and it was all really steak-heavy, and lots of big, like, chewy Cabernet Sauvignons on the list. And some really, like, definitely like a celebration restaurant. And going back earlier into my life, it was kind of one of the things that is hilarious about it. I think I was 5, and they asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and I was like, I want to go to a fancy dinner. So it was like always really, really something that I just wanted to know stuff about. I don't even know how. We were from a really tiny town. There were no fancy restaurants.
Right.
It was just something that I had always been into.
Awesome. So what was the track like from then until we met? Because that was in New York City.
Yeah. So when I got to Boston, I quickly like dropped out of school in Berkeley, but I was working at a dive bar there, a pretty iconic dive bar called Bukowski's.
Bukowski.
And it's known for its like crazy beer selection, and it's in a weird parking garage right near Berkeley. And I just wasn't really making enough money, and a friend of mine was like, you should go to this place in Harvard Square. They like, you know, you have fine dining background. And I was like, well, that's debatable, but it was enough to get me an interview. And that restaurant was actually pretty special. It was called Upstairs in the Square.
Okay.
And it was in Harvard Square. And Julia Child's like house was pretty much around the corner. That's a really small part of town.
Whoa.
And she used to come in there all the time before I worked there. And as she got older, she kind of stopped venturing out as much. But she was friends with the two ladies who owned it, who were about her age and had been there. That restaurant was, I think, when I worked there in 2007, it was probably 20 years old.
Yep.
So it was just really classic. Like, they had two dining rooms. One was really fancy tasting menu. And I worked downstairs in what they called the Monday Club, and it was just a bistro.
Okay.
And it was like, like Yo-Yo Ma and like all these like Harvard professors would hang out there. It was just kind of like this little clubhouse.
Wow. So,
so it was there that I kind of got more interested in food and wine.
Okay. Did you kind of like work your way up? Like, what did you go from server to cap? Like, how was the structure? Did you have that kind of ambition, or you were just kind of, it was a job?
It was a job, but it was a really, like, it came really naturally to me. Like, selling has always been something that I can just kind of do.
Yep.
And I'm really competitive, and I loved the food aspect, and I was really completely, like, enamored with the two women that owned it, because they were just, it was kind of rare. Every other restaurant I had ever been in or worked in along the way was definitely, like, male-dominated. Yep. So these were, like, two really powerful women with like a really high like place in society in this world that I had never even imagined. Like, Harvard itself is just this weird club.
Absolutely. It's like
and there were so many crazy people coming in there. So it begs the question, like, who is Julia Child? And like, why is there a picture of her like framed in here? Because she comes in here all the time. Like, why is this her seat at the bar? And like, what do I need to know about her? So it sort of opened the door. And yeah, I guess I worked my way up. I mean, I'd always been a server there, but I became like, I'm not the top server. I don't know how that works. But I was an integral part of the restaurant for sure. And actually, the hostess, a former hostess there named Chloe Ginevard, was at that time a maitre d' per se.
Okay.
So when I was like moving to New York, they were like, you know, where are you going to go? And I was like, I don't know, where I can get a job, I guess. And she kind of like put the word in. She didn't know me, but she got me an interview and set it up after weeks and weeks of trying to get a job in New York and not being able to.
Yep.
Like, I would have never even applied it per se. I had no idea like what the restaurant was. I didn't know who Thomas Keller was at that time.
Right.
And I was just like, well, I know I can like sell wine. I know that I'm good at this, and I've been waiting on these people who are, you know, they had VIPs. I was familiar with the whole like who's who thing, and I had started to learn, you know, tons about food. So I got the interview there and somehow kept going. They, you know, per se has an amazing, and Thomas in general, you know, has that amazing ability to kind of look past your resume.
Yep.
And that's something that I've always admired about the way they hire. Is like, if you're from the CIA, yeah, you'll probably get an interview too.
Sure.
But if you're not, they'll still like, they're going to give you a second look.
Absolutely.
Either way. If you're the right one.
Yeah, because if you're seeking out per se, that means that your ambition is at a certain level, and then as long as they can, I would like to think that they can kind of, they're pretty good. They're pretty structured now, where they can set you up for success. But when you arrived at per se, who was it John Benno? Was he? Or was
Jonathan Benno was the chef de cuisine.
Yep.
Eli was the executive sous chef. David Breeden was the butcher / AM sous chef.
Yep.
And they kind of like rotated those roles out. Corey Chow was over the Comey kitchen, like studying to replace Chung.
Yep.
Because Chung Chow they were all kind of getting ready to depart.
Right.
Jonathan was leaving to open
Lincoln.
Lincoln. I always say Bennu.
Almost.
Confusing. Chef de cuisine's leaving to open other restaurants.
Yeah.
But so I worked with JB. That's what they call him.
Yeah, that's intense. So
for probably about 4 months before he exited the restaurant and Eli took over.
Right. And so they have kind of a track record of starting people at the bottom, right? And then you kind of have to work your way up. So what was your official role when you started there?
I was a kitchen server.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, which is like food runner.
Yep. And then how long did it take for that to go, like, work your way up? And then what was your kind of, like, final position before you left? And what was that like?
I went from kitchen server... I kitchen served probably for about 8 months. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I'm pretty competitive. And I really struggled in the beginning. I was really, really just completely out of my element, in over my head in all capacities. But again, I really think they do an amazing job of being like, it's not like, why aren't you doing it? It's like, why can't we get you there?
Right.
It's always the question.
Right.
So they were amazing at that. I remember specifically Daisy Freitas looking at me and being like, I know you can do this. And she was training to become an expediter at the time. And I was just really like, I loved that job always. I would watch that job and it just seemed like kind of the heartbeat of the team in many ways. Like the front of house expediter was just so appealing to me because you don't have to be in the dining room as much.
Yep.
There's a lot of that crossover with being like the chef's sort of right-hand assistant that felt really, really important and fun and it's kind of organized chaos. So I wanted to do that and they were like, no, we don't need you to do that. We need you to back serve, which just seemed like hell to me. Like, I didn't want to do it because it's a really behind the scenes role.
Absolutely.
And it like that's just not my personality. And they pushed and pushed. And Anthony Rudolph was the general manager at the time. He had just taken over for Raj Dastani, and he was like, "I need you to do this." And I was like, "I'd rather kitchen serve. I don't want to do this." And we kind of went back and forth. And he was like, "You're never going to expedite if you don't, back serve." So I did it for about 3 months. I was pretty unhappy. Yeah. Pretty bad at it. and then that role opened up for expediter.
Perfect.
And they finally put me in there.
Yeah.
And that's where I stayed for most of the rest of the time.
Sure. So what kind of sparked the decision to leave then?
Oh man, let's see. I was pretty happy in New York, and I was really excited about the path that I was on. But I loved being in the kitchen so much that I almost it started to become very appealing to me to even get more into the back of house. And so I started asking if I could stage in the back, and I think that's where we kind of met. You were externing.
Exactly.
And I was kind of like, I want to get in there. I want to hang out.
Yeah.
And Eli was actually really open to that idea. At first, he was kind of like looked at me like I had 3 heads, but then he was like, if you want to come in on your day off, that's on you. Like, we're not going to pay you.
Right.
But I came in and hung out and just learned how to do like basic stuff. Like I had never been to culinary school, so I didn't know how to even hold a knife correctly.
Sure.
So just really, really novice. And right about that time, I won the scholarship that actually they do for front of house and back of house every year.
Yep.
And you can apply for anything. It's totally open-ended. You write about what you want to learn about. You can say, I want to learn about making blue cheese and, I want to go to Oregon and do that. And if they like your idea, they'll pick it and they'll fund it. So that was, I think, my idea. I'm trying to remember exactly what I wrote.
Yeah, because you have to write an essay for it, right? You have to
it was to compare and contrast fine dining in Europe versus fine dining in America and how that's different, specifically Michelin-starred restaurants.
Right. And that's so interesting because you picked Noma, or what did you pick? Just you wrote it as a kind of like a big thesis, and then Noma fell in your lap because of Matt Orlando.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
I wanted to go to Sophie Pick's restaurant.
Yeah.
And that was where I had picked. And even with Thomas writing a thing, being like, "Hey, can you do me a salad and let this girl come hang out?" She was like, "Does she speak French?" And I was like, "No." And she said, "Then no." And that was
so
the end
sad.
of that. And so I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do now. Like, that was my whole idea. And I was kind of like, what am I going to do? And we're just sitting there having a beer at the Coliseum, which is the bar right across the street. And Matt Orlando was like, why don't you just come to Noma? I'm going back there.
Crazy.
In 2 months. And I was like, can I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that was totally by happenstance. Yeah,
right.
I did not even, that was never even something I thought could have happened. And then there it was.
my Noma story is very similar because I asked GKC, Greg Huzia Carmel, when I was.
I love him.
Yeah, I know. So I asked him when
GKC's the man.
Exactly. So I asked him. He was my externship like manager guy, and right as my time was ending, I was like, I have 2 weeks before I have to go back to school. I really want to go to Mugaritz because I knew that he had spent a season there, and I was like, well, I really want to go. I was wondering if you could just give me the email contact so I could email someone and get my way in there. And he's like, well, Mugaritz doesn't accept anything less than a full season stage, but I can get you into Noma. And Noma was like this thing that was like, it had just gotten #1. It was like all this press was about it. I knew nothing about it, very similar to you, but it was this weird like backup thing. But that turned into this amazing,
which ends up being like the most unattainable. Like,
exactly. Now it's like,
happen?
Holy shit! How did you get into Noma? And it was like my plan B. But that's so funny that we both have very similar stories with that. But
that restaurant is so amazing in that way, and it's obviously not open in that form anymore. But it was really like that to be there too. I'm sure you can speak to that.
Yep.
Where it was just like this hodgepodge of like some people being just from around town, people coming from all across the globe.
Across the world, yeah.
It's really bizarre how that came together and worked so beautifully.
And my favorite thing about that experience for you is that you made a video about it, right?
Yes, I did. And actually, I was just thinking the other day, I should put that on YouTube someday.
Dude, I don't know how it's not on YouTube. Like, that was...
I don't think so. Maybe it is. Yeah, I didn't put it on YouTube. I remember trying to and being like...
Dude,
it's so funny now.
Let me help you with that because I think people need to see that for sure.
Will you put it on the internet?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, people need to see that for sure. So, I mean, it was more or less like people, like I've heard so many chefs talk to me because I do cooking stuff on the internet, and they're like, yeah, I really want to figure out a way to kind of like vlog as a chef, and that is essentially what you were doing, like 7 years ago in that situation where you're just kind of like, this is what happens when an American goes to Europe and spends time at Noma. So many people would watch. Like, I don't know. I was fascinated when back in the day when I heard that you did that. I was like, holy shit, that's awesome.
Which is so funny because no one okayed that.
Yeah.
I just carried this handy cam in there and no one said anything. And I would just pull it out and be like, I'd go to my locker and just like grab it.
Yep.
And I'd just be like, because Matt was kind of there being like, what's up? Let's me and you hang out in the PDR and do this private party. I'd be like, okay, cool. And I just never asked, and no one ever said stop. And I got some crazy like footage of things that they do that are really, really fun that later they actually did documentaries on, like their projects and stuff like that, which is hilarious. So yeah, we should put that on the internet.
That's so great. Okay, that's on the to-do list for after this. Okay. So after New York, you went back to Charleston, and I'd be interested to kind of have you pitch Effin B a little bit, which for everybody who doesn't know, it's literally spelled EFFIN, like Effin B.
It's a visual pun.
Yeah, exactly, which I love. It's just on audio format sometimes it doesn't come out like that. So so how did Effin B come about? And just tell me a little bit about how that transpired.
Yeah, well, actually, I took a little sidestep. I was in California for a bit right before I came back, and I worked in the French Laundry. And was kind of helping them out with an expediting role when they were doing that pop-up in London. When they did that pop-up at Harrods, they sent a lot of their staff over there. So I was hanging out there and kind of doing, I worked the Oyster Bar at Bouchon. I was just sort of bouncing around Yountville.
Yep.
And I wanted to come back east. I got pregnant while I was there. And it was really kind of a surprise, and I think I was 25 at the time.
Wow.
And I'm from Charleston, so I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't want to stay out here. I'm too poor to go back to New York and have a baby. And the demands of the restaurant, at that point, I was working only in the back of house. Like, Thomas had been super cool about, like, kind of transitioning me over.
Wow.
And I was bad at it, to be totally honest. I wasn't that good at it. And it was really hard to come from being super... Not to be an asshole, but like I was pretty successful at the front of house part of it.
Yeah.
So it was so hard to suck so bad at the back of house aspect, and I was far away, and I was pregnant, and I was just like, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home.
Yep, I hear you.
And so I did, and it was one of the best things. But I took like a year off, and then I started working at Fig. I had another baby in the meantime. They're really close in age.
Yep.
And I knew I wanted to start a family. And I was struggling with how to keep doing, restaurant stuff is not conducive to family life in any way, really, if we're totally honest.
Absolutely.
It just keeps you on your feet for long hours, and it's not a family-friendly kind of environment. Nobody can come visit you in the middle of service.
That is true.
So I kind of felt lost, and I kind of felt spit out by the industry, like, if you're not able to do this, and then you can't be a part of this.
Sure.
And that was hard for me to accept. And I've, as I said, like, being in music, like, I had some recording studio background, and I know how to use some equipment, obviously not internet equipment as much as, like, literal analog, like mics and stuff.
Right.
And I was working at Fig, and I still do. I've worked there since I went back to work.
Yep.
And I love it. It's a really casual, low-key, super beautiful food environment, but it wasn't really doing it for me as far as, like, I just missed the connections that you make when you're and it's such a small world. I know you know that, with like that kind of level of restaurants. And we were outside having a bottle of rosé one night, and the girl that works there with me, who's my closest friend, Nikki, she's amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
She we were just talking shop. We're doing the normal thing that everybody does when they get off work, is they kind of rehash their night, or what's going on around town, or who's leaving this restaurant, or chef's taking over this thing. And we were kind of being cheeky about it because we're, just hanging out.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend was like, someone would listen to that. He's a big podcast enthusiast.
Yeah.
So it was kind of his idea. And I was like, you think so? And we have this other guy that is really fun, Philip Michael Cohen, who also worked with us at Fig. And we were like, let's just try it. We got some equipment, set it up, and it sort of instantly took off in Charleston.
Right.
And that's kind of where it stayed. I mean, it's growing all the time. But the city got behind it so quickly, and it's just so much fun.
That's so good. So how often do you guys record?
How often?
Yeah.
Once a week.
Once a week.
Yeah, we do it once a week. And then sometimes, if there's people in town, we'll do like 3 in a week and then take a couple weeks off.
Right.
But we typically have a Saturday record session, and then we release the episode on Friday.
Yep.
And we try to do them not any further out than necessary, just so they can be current.
Yep.
It changes so quick.
Sure. And like you said, there's no rules, right? It's just you guys shooting the shit is basically.
Yeah, literally shooting the shit.
Yeah.
And sometimes to a fault, like, I'll listen to it and be like, what is this show about? What is it about? Nobody knows.
There's no story.
But it's entertainment, and I think that the biggest thing that I found was that with the hysteria that people have about food and restaurants in general and culture and what's going on, it's just another facet. It's something else that they can dig a little deeper into the industry, because I realized even writers and people who are in food media don't have as much of a perspective, or at least not a correct perspective, as someone who's currently working.
Yep. When you're really in the trenches, there's like such a different story and like a dialogue that happens with, like, it's basically like you and your comrades talking about, what the last battle was like, and that's something that, like, I mean, who wouldn't want to listen to that? Number one, and number two, I'm a completely supportive of it, because that's my whole thesis with everything that I'm doing, is that there's so much content that goes uncaptured with a restaurant that people are 100% willing to watch. It just, you have to go about the process of capturing it and distributing it. So
exactly.
That's why I was excited to talk to you so much, because, like, we both kind of had very similar trajectories, but we've kind of gone on these weird offshoots. But I'd be curious to hear what would be maybe you're here already, but what would be a win for you for Effin B?
Oh, sponsorship. No, we're not there. Any sort of sponsorship whatsoever would be like a super huge win.
Right.
And we have had offers. It's not that we're not there. It's finding the right ones for me. I'm pretty I want to keep it. It's such my baby that I don't want to, like, for the lack of a better word, I don't want to pimp it out to something that doesn't make sense for the listeners. It doesn't make sense for us.
Yep.
And at the same time, I know that we can't keep asking 3 full-grown adults to, like, spend this much time on something
exactly
that they're not getting paid for.
Yep.
But we had a piece of equipment break. And we were like, we can't put the show out. And I was like, I don't have any more money to put towards this thing. Like, this is great. It was the interface. And within like 20 hours, I just put a GoFundMe up because I was like, you know, if you guys like the show and you want to keep listening, like, this is what we need, and we just don't have the money.
Sure.
And they, like, funded it, like, ×5. Like, so I know that people, it's like, sometimes you just have to be realistic and be like, people don't mind paying for something that they love.
Right.
And enjoy, and supporting something, you know, so it's just for us finding the right way to monetize it that feels fair to us and to the listeners would be a huge win for me.
Right. Okay, cool. So it's just all about finding the right, it just has to feel right for you, and it doesn't have to...
Yeah, it sucks to feel like something is like, because I think the vibe that the people get from the show is that we're real and we're genuine and honest about it. So if you say that and then you throw in like some luxury real estate,
or like KitchenAid decided to,
yeah, where you're like, oh, you know what I love is luxury real estate. Like, no, I can't. Nobody's buying that coming from me.
Right, so. Exactly. So you mentioned that you are at a more, you know, kind of casual spot now. I'd be interested to hear your take on kind of the current state of restaurants, and more specifically on the high end of the spectrum, because I know that a lot of people come to this show like looking for fine dining news, because that's more or less what I end up talking about. But
totally,
do you just the current state of how things are at right now, where we are in a 2017 restaurant environment?
Well, I mean, even in my like kind of the last 10 years of me working in restaurants, I've seen a pretty dramatic turn towards a more casual model.
Sure.
And that's like hard for me to watch, you know, and everybody saw that review that Per Se got, and that was just like crushing for me and for the people who work there and for people who support Thomas, but at the same time very eye-opening, because you see people doing it so successfully. And I think there are people, you know, will say like fine dining's out of style, fine dining's coming back. Like you see critics kind of bouncing around back and forth on, is it in style or is it out of style?
Sure.
And I think really what I've seen, the only thing that is true is that it depends on the restaurant.
Got it.
Because like Noma can go to Mexico and absolutely blow everyone's mind. And you can look at that model and say, yeah, do you know how much money those guys made on that Popup? Like, it's insane. You can't even, like,
right.
That is a success.
Yep.
100%. But then you look at something else, and it's like, just maybe here. Sean Brock it hails from Charleston, and McCrady's reinvented itself this year, and they're doing a really, like, progressive, incredibly, like, intimate tasting menu. Like, they completely revolutionized their whole concept and changed the old McCrady's into a tavern.
Yep.
And then took their wine room and made that into this tasting menu. And it was met with really good reviews, but the restaurant is just not busy.
Sure.
And so that's, I think, maybe not about the restaurant or Sean as much as it is where we are, you know?
Yep.
There's a lot of factors that go into where restaurants are right now, because some places are like, I work at another restaurant currently that's called Bar Normandy.
Yeah.
That is quite literally a continuous pop-up that happens nightly.
Wow.
And it starts in a bakery after 3, and it's this one guy cooking on 2 induction burners and a panini press, and Bon Appetit just named it like one of the best new restaurants in America.
That's amazing.
So that's insane to me, but the food is unbelievably elevated. You know, it's just like, you can find these little pockets where I think fine dining is its own niche, and you have these like people like you and I who are always aware of it, but I'm so shocked to find that the majority of people are just now becoming aware of it in many ways. Right. Do you find that?
That to me is like a little bit, you know, like when I think about that, I think about places like, thinking about how like Lazy Bear started in San Francisco as kind of like this weird underground kind of thing that happened. And then I also think about places like 42 Grams in Chicago, where that guy like started doing pop-up dinners out of his apartment and then decided to open a restaurant space. I think that's something where you have these people that are kind of like super on the inside that hear about it and like to go eat at places like that. But it's unfortunate that that's like, I make this reference all the time, that if I am really, really passionate about headphones, and I really, really want to make the best pair of headphones I can sit in my garage and make headphones day and night and just sell them on the internet, and it's a thing that I can do. But when you serve food to people and you're a chef, that is the least invasive way to get your food out to people is these pop-up style things. And then it turns into this thing where how do you market it and how do you get people to come? And it's something that no one, I think, has really nailed down and figured out. It kind of turns into this thing that's like cool, but then how does that turn into something that you can actually do sustainably as a restaurant? And does it lose its cool after it becomes a brick and mortar?
Right.
It's really it's interesting. What I'm interested in right now is the whole bringing back of like the white tablecloth. Like, have you heard of like the grill in New York City? The review that just came out on them. That to me is fascinating. That there's like a $93 lobster dish that people are like swooning over. Where like I feel like 18 months ago, if you told someone that you're opening a place that has a $93 lobster dish, they'd like completely be like, "Fuck you."
Right. Well, didn't that happen in Washington, D.C.? They opened up the scene, and it was just like an immediate, like, what, 3 months? And like, bye, nobody's going to ever do that.
Exactly.
So bye.
And then you have, like, Le Cuckoo and the grill in New York City where it's like, we're getting this resurge now of, like, white tablecloth, like, servers walking around in a vest, and people love it.
Absolutely.
It just ebbs
and I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that to me is, I'm so...
I mean, you started off in a steakhouse. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that feels like proper service to me, and that feels like something that I like yearn for the days when that happened. I can remember though, even at per se, like it's a lot of it's so much, so connected obviously to the economy. When the economy crashed in 2008, and they were like still having these crazy opulent parties. Like there's always going to be that percentage of people that still want to dine that way.
Yep.
But they would make us hide the trays inside. They would be like, come inside with the champagne. Like, don't stand outside by the door. Like, put that inside the door so that they did not want to appear opulent.
Right.
The guest, like the client. They're like, put this inside and then you can come into the room where we all get crazy and like roll around in caviar.
Interesting.
And it was like they wanted to mask that because they felt bad.
Yeah.
Or they saw, wasteful. But I think there's certainly a place for that where it's like I want to be able to go to a place like that. When I go to New York, I'm gonna go to those places.
Right.
That's like that to me. It's sneaky how you can go to a place where you're like, yeah, this like server came over one time and is wearing jeans and a tank top because it's armpit hair, and my bill's $165 for just me.
Yep.
Like that can happen too.
Yep.
So where's the value in that?
Sure.
Like, you have to like strike a balance, and it has to feel worth it to the guests. And I think if that happens, then it's successful in many different forms.
Right. And I think that, I mean, if you think about like Europe in the 1980s, right? There would be like, you could all the chefs would go to Paris and train and then come back. Like there's classic accounts of places in England that would just basically be doing French food that they learned in England. But now I think the world is so aware that it's very difficult to have a concept that is unique because it's very easy to get ripped off. So I see it as something that's like the market's big enough now because the consumer is smart enough now to know that you are trying to do new Nordic food because I saw it on Instagram. And I know exactly who you're ripping off because I know what that food looks like.
Right.
So
they're my friend.
Exactly. So you just need to. I'm nothing but optimistic about it, right? So that means that I could be here in Seattle and open up a new Nordic place, and there's no place here in Seattle that's doing Nordic inspired food unless you go out to Lumi Island and see the Willow's Inn guys. So. But then that means because of that awareness, people know what I'm trying to do, and they're much more keen to be like, "Oh, I can get that here."
100%. Yeah.
But I do agree with you where it's kind of like hitting this weird point where it's like you said, it's just as expensive to go out to a casual place as it is for a tasting menu, like my tasting menu. So
yeah,
it's gonna. To me, it's going to go backwards, right? It's going to start to ebb the other way, where the really high-end, opulent places are going to kind of like come back into style, I think, and then there's going to be this surge of really cheap casual food because people are going to realize that they don't need a dining room anymore to serve their food to people, right? They can hire these food delivery services, or like there's places in Seattle who will literally capitalize on like a 12-seat dining room because they know that people will just stand on the street to line up for their stuff. And they're like, well, this street is just extra square footage for us where we can put people to wait for our product. You know what I mean?
Rent free.
Exactly. So that is going to like completely take over. And then they're the ones that are going to be able to survive, because the people with a 40-seat dining room and they only fill it on a Friday, Saturday night, they may or may not go out of business. It's really fascinating. It's just like such a big market shift, and it's great to see it. I don't know. It is. It's
refreshing for me. I think at the end of the day, it's all about eliminating the noise and the people who don't deserve to be there in that way. You know, because it seems so sexy to open a restaurant now, and it's so easy to make a restaurant look sexy on Instagram.
Yep.
But if their food isn't there has to be that X factor in whatever your concept is, and it has to be actually better. Because you're right. Anybody can get on and look at a mood board and be like, oh, I'm going to pull off this restaurant.
Exactly.
Here. And it's hard for the consumer, unless they go in and taste the food, to know the difference. And be like, what is the good place?
Sure. Exactly.
Everything's sort of getting turned on its head. Even Yelp, like, people rely less and less on those sort of websites, where that used to be like, you live and die by the reviews.
Yep.
It's more about, like, which person endorsed it on social media.
Right. So another question that I would be interested to hear your take on is the people that are kind of involved in these restaurants. Because when you talk about that guy who's just kind of like cooking on an induction by himself, that's like a sexy story to talk about. But when you kind of get to the point where you need to open your own space, you need people. And a big question that I'm sure you've also talked about in your podcast is this quote unquote like lack of talent in the industry. Do you agree or disagree with that statement? And I'd be interested to hear, possible remedies for the whole situation.
That's like the $1 million question.
Right.
The staffing crisis is real for us. For the Charleston market, it's 100% real, and it's mostly due to the number of restaurants exceeding the number of people.
Got it.
I don't think it has much to do with talent. Like, I feel like there's plenty of chefs that I'm like, why are you working an oyster bar at this restaurant? Like, you could totally be, the chef of your own restaurant. You could chef your own restaurant. A lot of it has to do with education, I think.
Okay.
There's people that have talent that don't have the business side, myself included. Like, I've been approached several times about opening restaurants, and something like that's like a lifelong dream for me. And when I sit down to write a business plan, I realize, like, nothing in my career, no job, no nothing has prepared me at all to do that.
Sure.
I can do any other facet of the restaurant. I can wash dishes, I can sign, I can cook a little bit, like enough to. I could do my own thing. I could make a meatball sandwich truck, and crush it.
Yep.
But I can't write a business plan, and I don't have the knowledge. And I'm teaching myself that now. But I think it holds people back, and then they end up kind of settling in jobs where maybe they're overqualified, and then they end up getting burnt out and being like, "This sucks," because the pay is terrible, especially if you're in the back of house.
Yep.
And the front of house jobs are around, but the ones that are really good, like, people aren't leaving those positions. So I think it's tricky. I mean, that's why the restaurant. Sorry.
No, you're fine. little kids.
You're hitting my babies.
Yeah, exactly.
Hang on 1 second, guys. Yes. Here you go. Sorry. The crisis has a lot to do with, it looks a lot more fun to work in restaurants than it actually is. And I've been, not to be like, when I was running food, but that's how it kind of feels. Is like, you see these people come in and you're like, they have no sense of urgency. They have no, willingness to work up through the top. They want to come in and be like, where's my $300 a night? That's what I'm here for. Is this easy because you're busy?
Sure.
Oh, it's not? Okay, then I'm quitting. And with restaurants opening in Charleston, at least, 2 a day, it feels like. The grass always looks greener, and there's some big new chef coming in, and their restaurant's going to be so busy.
Right.
And you're going to kill it there. So you end up, loyalty is scarce, and you kind of never stay at a place long enough to really cut your teeth and be like, do I actually even want to do this as a job? Or am I just a college student that needs to make some money?
So do you see it? I mean, I think about that as well sometimes, because I always want to use that phrase, back when I started, because I really do feel like that window of 2000 2009 to 2014 was like the golden age of, you know, working in these
people
fine
giving
dining.
a shit.
Yeah, because it's like no one had space. It was insanely competitive. Like if you, like I wanted to go back to per se, but I couldn't because it was like there was a 4-month wait list to get a commis job, you know.
Right.
And now it seems like everyone is keen to hire. I went to a restaurant panel the other day, and someone asked a question from the audience, like, "What's your hiring process like?" And literally all 3 chefs on the panel were like, "We'll take you right now." Like,
yeah.
Like, when can you start? Like, zero, I don't care what your resume is. I don't care what your skill level is. We just literally need a set of hands.
Yep.
So I'd be interested to hear what you think restaurant professionals, like chefs and, no, you're fine.
It's great. It's lunchtime around here.
Yep, exactly.
What restaurants can do?
Yeah, like what restaurants and, you know, like managers and chefs need to bring to the table to kind of attract the best people going forward.
Well, I mean, for me, obviously, I have my own set of standards that I will work at this place and I won't work at this place. But I think above all, like, even if you're never worked in a restaurant before, there's somewhere along the way it got like decided that you don't have to feel important at a restaurant. And the first people to really kind of show me otherwise were Mary Catherine and Deborah at that restaurant, and then even exponentially more at Per Se, where they were just like constantly checking in, constantly making sure that they were offering continuing education, that you weren't getting stagnant in a position, that it wasn't like just here, come in and do your job, because the job is a grind. It's physically a grind.
Yep.
It's mentally exhausting in back or front of house. And I think that people, either you're a busy restaurant and you're like, oh, we'll just always have staff so we don't have to treat the people like they matter.
Yeah.
And that seems so dumb, but that's how I feel. Like I can see that people are just like, yeah, we're busy, so come on in, you're welcome.
Sure.
But you get 7 tables. and that people don't care, and that sort of does this trickle down effect throughout the entire restaurant. Like, you can tell when a server doesn't care. You can tell when a cook doesn't care.
Yep.
And it's usually a direct reflection of the owner.
Yeah.
I'm going to miss that.
Absolutely.
But they attract a certain type of employee because they've decided who they are, and they're busy, so that's a plus.
Right.
But it's more about, I'd stayed at a place longer that was less busy, where I felt like I had upward movement and someone who cared about what they were doing way longer than I would stay at just a busy restaurant or a popular restaurant.
Okay, so it's a combination of education, identity, and or anything like that without any of the restaurant experience.
I think you have a hard road ahead of you if you do. Because I think that people who are watching and who want to watch that kind of stuff, they either know a bunch or they know nothing. So you can count on like reeling in the people who know nothing, because they won't be able to spot not a fake, but maybe someone who doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yep.
And the people who do are going to immediately be like, that's hack.
Right.
And I don't think you're going to be able to fool those kind of people, and those are the ones that you want. Enticing for people to like dive into food media without having a genuine background, just maybe an enthusiast is something different.
Sure. Is there a restaurant project that would be so, like, if it had that combination of those 3 things, like identity, education, and progress, would you leave the podcast for a restaurant like that? Or you're kind of just like firmly, you put your foot down and you said, no, never again?
You mean like my own restaurant?
Yeah, whether it's your own or if, like some,
with like seeing the podcast through.
Right.
And in the meantime, I haven't changed anything else about my career. I've just kind of added that as an element of creativity and hopefully something that will be profitable.
Absolutely. Did you get any backlash from people like in your network when they were like, what is like, because I feel like there might be some people listening that may or may not have this thing where they want to put out some stuff about themselves, but I mean, you and I know how it feels. Like, phones aren't allowed in a lot of restaurants, and it's like, what are you doing taking a selfie? What are you doing talking to?
There's some things where like I'll be making a cappuccino. I'm like, oh, I wanna do like a boomerang of me, and I'm like, I'm at work.
Okay.
I'm clocked in on someone else's clock. Like that's.
Yep.
That for me feels off limits, just
Sure.
because, but I think it's situational. I think there's people, I know there's people, I see them come in all the time that they're fully plugged in, cameras out, taping their own little like Insta story with special lighting at their table the entire time they're there. And, no one would ever tell them to.
Your Instagram that you're here at this restaurant and you're doing this cool thing like, hey, we just got in 20 kilos of live langoustines from Norway and they're amazing and this is what it looks like. If the right person sees that on that Instagram, it's going to translate into a butt in a seat at the restaurant.
Yep.
And to me, that is like, however that transpires. And that was partially when I decided that I thought that there was not enough content being captured at restaurants, so I was all about like using the employees that were already there to kind of scale that. But
totally.
I'm doing media in addition to restaurant stuff.
I haven't gotten any of that, but I'm extra like guarded. Like there's a lot of stuff that my boyfriend Jeremy edits the show with me.
Yep.
And he's always like, this is great. Like, that's meaty. We need to leave this in. And just to protect people because it's such a small community.
Yep.
I'll leave it out. Or if I think that someone, if it's not necessary, I'll leave it out.
Sure.
And I err on the side of caution. And we've never had anybody that's been on the show or that's heard something about themselves on the show call and be like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
like, why would you, we try to, like, again, it's of Bar Normandy, who just got named. So that's unfortunate because that's them just looking for clicks.
Yep. That's.
But if you listen to the whole show, you'll understand like what he was saying and why he was not being a pompous piece of shit.
Sure.
So it's it's just on me to like. I just try to be honest about what I'm putting out. But yeah, you can definitely get people like, hey, what the fuck, like. You made me sound like an asshole. I'm like, no, sir, you just are an asshole, and that's on you. Or that we're getting to be guests where you're like, oh my god, really?
Yeah.
Ask people.
Yeah.
When you get a yes, you're like, seriously? Or if they've even better if they've heard good things about the show, which she had, and she was really excited to come on. So that was like super flattering.
Amazing.
And then we're headed to New York.
Whoa.
In September. Yeah. So that should be a big old reunion. We're gonna get a lot of people on the show.
Yeah. So how long are you gonna be there? You're just gonna is that specifically for the podcast or it's for something?
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's just for the podcast. Yeah. Effin B Radio is going to New York. Katie Effin B Radio. And I have a shameful like Twitter presence. I like sometimes do it, sometimes don't.
Yeah, Twitter's hard.
It's hard. Yeah. But we're definitely all over Instagram.
You're there. Okay, perfect. I absolutely have no doubt that you and I could talk for hours. We've talked for hours already in scheduling this show.
No, it's so fun to talk to you always.
Absolutely. So hopefully this is just episode 1 of many more with you here on the Emulsion. I can't thank you enough for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Justin. This is a blast.
Thank all of you listeners for listening. I appreciate your ears. If you have any questions for Lindsay, she just